We're now live, Chair, on YouTube.
Lovely, thank you very much, Anna. And hello everyone, welcome to this virtual meeting of the Joint Staff Consultative Committee. It's being conducted with members, officers and representatives at various locations, and we are all communicating successfully via audio on. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer, William Edwards, to explain how proceedings will work and confirm that the members and officers are all in attendance. So over to you, Will.
Good morning, everybody. I'll start with a roll call. When I call your name, please can you indicate your attendance to confirm that you are present, can hear and be heard. I'll start with our members. Councillor Aspinwall. Appears to have frozen, so I'll come back to her. Councillor Hone.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Hoskins.
Yeah, good morning.
Councillor Strong.
Morning, everyone.
Thank you very much. Officers in no particular order, Anthony Roche.
Yes, good morning.
Ian Cooper.
Yes, here.
Joe Kishishian.
Morning.
Helen Bylett.
Good morning.
Councillor Aspinwall, are you back with us?
I am. Apologies, I don't know what happened there. I was merrily talking to myself.
Not to worry. Thank you very much. That's everybody I have in attendance. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. Members may request to speak using the raise hand function, and the same procedure if we come to vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Aspinwall.
Excellent, thank you ever so much. I didn't hear quite everything that went on there, apologies for that, but I'm taking it that we've got in attendance who we're expecting, otherwise you'd have told me. So first of all then is apologies for absence. I've had apologies received from Councillor Sue and Gwala. Are there any other apologies received from anybody else? No, not
yes. Debbie Eland and Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews, please, for unison. Okay.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks, Dee. Anyone else? No, okay. I'm flitting between quite small screens, so if I don't see a hand virtually raised, just wave or shout, and then I'll be able to see that you're after some attention. So, Chair's announcements then. So this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHGC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and the speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements that are on the agenda. So moving on then, let's go, oh, Anthony. So I've only just noticed that you have a guest. She's gorgeous. That's very distracting. Moving on then, so staff consultation forum. So we need to receive the minutes from June, July and August. And Ian, you're going to present these minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief run through. You've also got the notes in front of you from the 3 meetings. I think it's sort of 2 main themes to pick out. Mainly was the return to work, going from the staff survey through to developing a plan about how we're going to start to go back into the office. That is now kind of gathering a pace with a plan to start to go back in from early October. It also covers developing plans around how the IT provision will be updated so all staff have laptops, which allows much better working between both the office and home. The other, just to note on that, there's a note mentioning there about recycling container for lateral flow tests. That is now in place in the DCO for staff to drop them in to when they're in the building anyway. I'm not encouraging staff to go in there, but that hopefully helps with our recycling targets too. And the other bit, sort of main theme in there was around the pay award, but I'll let Joe cover that in the HR update because there's much more detail sort of since the notes here around where that's got to. But apart from that, happy to pick up any questions on specifics that are in those notes or anything else you want to ask about.
Lovely, thank you very much. Terry, Councillor Hone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ian, you mentioned about having a collection of lateral flow tests in the office there. Is that going to be made available to the public as well? or is it just members? Have we told members that it's available and officers?
Because we don't want to encourage people to go into the office at the moment, we're not sort of advertising it too much more widely. We probably will make it available to councillors when you're in anyway. Obviously, when we get to a stage when it is much sort of safer for people to sort of be all into the building, then we probably will promote it even further than that. But at the moment, it's just people going in anyway, which is very few at the moment. We're able to drop those tests off, those little plastic bags at the end of the testing off into the box. So we'll consider publicising it more widely, but at the moment, just very much limited to those going anyway.
And what happens to them after we collect them?
They get sent off to the company that provides the box, and they go and recycle the different bits of it into different opportunities to kind of recycle them rather than just throw them in. So it seems quite positive. We're giving it a go, see how it goes. It's not very expensive, but we'll give it a go, see how much we get in there.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so are there any other questions on that? No? Okay, all right, I'll just move on to item 4 then, which is the HR updates information note. So Jo, over to you to present. I'm just going to reset my sound while we do this, but I will still be able to hear you. I just won't be able to speak.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So obviously you've all seen the report, which I won't cover in too much detail, but there are a few key points of interest for and I wanted to highlight for the committee members today. Ian's already referenced the future ways of working plan, which you may be aware we shared initially with staff in July. This has been discussed more in more detail recently at the senior managers group, and then also with the wider staff group at the staff briefing earlier this week. The general approach of encouraging staff to come back to the DCO for just 1 day per week from the 4th of October has been appreciated by the majority of staff, and it will be a good test of the measures we put in place. As Ian mentioned, we've got a desk booking system which will be put in place to facilitate the allocation of hot desks and will enable teams to book an area together if so wished. Some teams have already been getting used to a bit more office working, including the IT team, who are busy with the laptop rollout. Customer service team also returned to the office on a part-time basis during August, and as well as our waste team in the Buntingford office, and of course our team at the North Herts Museum and Town Hall. We basically intend to seek some feedback from staff during the first couple of weeks back to pick up quickly on any issues or concerns. And of course, we've got Helen's discussion paper a little bit later on talking about the benefits and challenges of home working, which will be of interest. So further on to the paper, in terms of recruitment, that's been busy again in the last quarter with a number of appointments across different service areas, as well as the more recent activity with regard to recruitment of the new service director for Place. And you'll note there's also been some casual staff recruitment needed for the town hall to support the increase in sort of event bookings that have been going on since restrictions have been lifted. We're also pleased to be supporting the government Kickstart scheme, and I've detailed some of the details of the scheme in the paper there, but our first trainee started working with the IT team this week. As you will appreciate, with this type of placement, individuals will be benefiting from line manager support on a face-to-face basis, and so we're hoping that other service areas will be able to take on trainees as we return to more office-based working. As it stands, that the scheme ends for a start date of the end of December, so we will kind of just be working with a couple of service areas that have already expressed an interest to get those vacancies advertised and filled before the end of the schemes. Over the summer, we've appointed 3 more apprentices, and we're in the process of recruiting 2 more to replace those that have recently finished. That will bring our cohort up to a full capacity for the time being. In terms of the pay negotiation, this year's pay award, you'll see from the staff consultation notes that it's kind of giving a monthly update, but there isn't a final offer yet or a final decision. The final offer was made by the National Employers Group. This was rejected by the National Joint Council in August, and now union members will be invited to vote on whether this will be accepted towards the end of this month and early into October. So hopefully that will be sorted relatively soon, but we'll just have to wait and see. terms of employee benefits, you'll note from the paper that the uptake of flu vouchers has been good again this year's vaccination programme, with all those aged under 50 being offered an e-voucher which can be used at Boots pharmacies that are supporting the vaccination programme. So that could be sort of suited to people that are dotted around rather than having one location. We are continuing to support mental health and wellbeing, of course, and since the last meeting, our mental health first aiders have started a monthly drop-in session, which is being held on Zoom at the moment, and we've had some positive feedback from those who have attended so far. And this month, we also marked World Suicide Prevention Day by taking the opportunity to raise awareness and share information about how we can all play a part in spotting the signs. There was access to a free training webinar, which was also shared on the council Twitter feed and was made available to the wider community as well as staff. In addition, this year, we've also provided a more detailed suicide prevention training to over 70 employees following a request via the Corporate Safeguarding Group. And then in paragraph 3.10, we've got a summary of the June inclusion meeting where the discussion topic was disability. It's interesting to note that although the group, or we noted it as a group, that there's only a very small minority of staff who declared a disability, many of us in the group have some connection, a personal connection with disability, and there was a wide range of points covered in the discussion. You'll note that I've also included a summary of the COVID-19 absence data, which shows that the numbers for April to June and June to September this year being slightly higher than they were last year. Hopefully, with the benefit of the vaccinations in place now for COVID, then the number of cases over the winter months will decline. But of course, we'll need to keep this under close review. And just to mention that to date, we don't have any cases of long COVID, which is obviously a good thing. Overall absence levels remain relatively low, although slightly higher in the last few months compared to when we were under lockdown restrictions. And finally, you'll see on the labour turnover stats, unfortunately, this has started to increase with a higher number of leavers as the employment market has become buoyant. We kind of expected that, but then we've got figures there showing that it's increased in the last quarter. Ian, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add on shaping our future, but happy to take any questions.
That's okay, Chair. Yes, I'll add a little bit. So we've had a recent steering group meeting of Shaping Our Future Group, which is looking at how we translate the new proposed corporate council plan and its objectives into what we want from our staff. And a good discussion about what that means. And I've got a draft proposal, and we'll now be taking that forward into an action plan in terms of what that means for our HR teams, for our staff, and for learning and employee engagement. And I suppose when we come to the last item on the agenda, it might be a topic we might want to discuss at a later meeting of this group, as to a bit more in-depth review of what Shaping Up has been doing. But that's just a proposal for you if you want to take it up.
Thank you, Ian. Keith, I can see that your hand is up. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I'm noting that in several sectors of the economy, they're finding it increasingly difficult to recruit. How difficult are we finding it to recruit? Are we getting the depth of applicants that we would normally expect, or is it starting to be a problem for us? I mean, I know at a base we're having problems, and that's an entirely separate matter. But for ourselves, how difficult is it for us to recruit at the moment?
I'm happy to take that question, Chair. Yeah, I think in all honesty, we've not seen much of a difference in terms, or no, we've got certain positions that are traditionally difficult to recruit for, some of the professional posts, for example. So we've had, I wouldn't say had on whole we haven't had any difficulty, but certainly we've in the main, we haven't seen some of the difficulties that we've seen in sort of wider sectors of the economy. So long may that continue. But yeah, I think we've got an estate surveyor post, for example, that's been advertised a couple of times, and that's recently closed again with a very small number of applicants. We're hoping we will be able to fill that post this time round. But traditionally, things like environmental health officers have been very difficult to come by, of course, over the last, in the last 3 or 4 years, actually, and particularly more so in pandemic, where there's workloads for all councils have increased. Planning can be difficult to recruit for, although we have recently successfully filled vacancies in planning, and quite often in the legal team, vacancies can be difficult, but we don't have any of those just at the last quarter or so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Claire, did you want to come in?
Yeah, you mentioned planning, and I know planning was there was quite a few gaps in the planning department. How many vacancies are there now in planning?
We're not advertising any at the moment, so I'm not aware that we've got any up and coming. It may well be that we've got some kind of in the pipeline. So if obviously we've got applicants that have been offered jobs and they've got to work notice. Yeah, I don't have the full details on whether we've got anybody kind of still pending. I don't know whether Helen knows any more than me.
Can't think that we have. I know that we have recently filled some positions in planning. So we are waiting new starters.
Good to hear.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. I've just got a couple of questions on this, Joe, and thanks for preparing such a full report. And I'm aware that we haven't had a chance to chat about it beforehand, which is probably my busy diary's fault. And I'm really pleased to see that we've got the full cohort of apprentices. I'm also aware of kind of the recent research and what we've all thought has been happening during the pandemic around the employment of young people being very severely affected by the working from home, and lots of people that are still living with their parents who now have got to find an office in their bedroom, and kind of what that's been like for apprentices, particularly due to their demographic. Has that been something that we've seen at NHGC? And with now the full cohort, is there anything sort of mitigating actions that we're putting in place to support those people in that age group?
Yeah, I'm happy to start that off, although Helen might want to come in as well. I think what I can say is that in terms of most of our apprentices are being well supported, working from home. I think there's a mix. I think Helen might be able to have more detail about whether or not I think we've got some that come in to work maybe as much as one day a week. I know certainly within the HR team we've got an apprentice who comes in fairly regularly for her webinars, because I don't think her broadband supports it quite as well as it should do at home. So she comes in when she needs to for that. And certainly all of the apprenticeship training has been online, so there's been no kind of hiccups or delays in them actually doing their remote learning, or their learning for, it's being accommodated remotely. Helen, do you want to add anything to that? I'm sure you've got some detail.
Yeah, so we had 2 apprentices that didn't actually complete their apprenticeship with us, quite young apprentices, and it wasn't completely attributed to working from home. It was contributed to reevaluating what they thought they could do. But we re-advertised those vacancies and filled them. But yeah, as Joe said, we do have apprentices that because we are now able to go into the office, they are able to have a little bit more contact with their manager in the office. At the height of lockdown, it was more challenging, but we made sure that they were fully supported and that they support each other as a group as well. The cohort of apprentices meet together as a group to kind of get together and support each other. But we were really lucky that all of our training providers were able to move the learning online, so there was no disruption to learning at all for any of our apprentices.
That's good to hear, and I think the 2 that have reevaluated, that's a similar theme that I'm seeing across kind of other apprenticeship employers. Brilliant, thanks for that. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. The COVID absences to me seem to be significantly higher, particularly in terms of days lost this year, which one would expect as the pandemic has continued. I guess there's obviously when you look at it sort of just month by month, it looks to be more of a concern. My question though is around we have no cases of long COVID. How are we monitoring that? Long COVID obviously can present in a number of different ways and can often be hidden and appear to be other issues. Is there anything that we're doing to monitor that and sort of any anticipation of what the impact might be going forward? One of the reasons I ask that is that when we're looking at the number of cases of COVID and then looking at the days lost, it does look as though we're losing more days per case, just at a glance.
Yeah, I think in terms of long-term sick, so I suppose there's a couple of things to say, isn't there? In terms of the data in that table, that's obviously only kind of a snapshot of the days absent from work. And of course, as we know, some people are may suffer from, might have a positive COVID diagnosis, but not actually have severe symptoms, and those with mild symptoms may continue to work. And we won't be aware of it because it won't be an absence because they'll be working from home. So there's probably that to kind of give the context. We do monitor all of our long-term sick cases. At any one time, there's thankfully only a kind of a small handful. So we're involved in kind of the detail from that point of view, and therefore we would look at each case on a sort of a case-by-case basis to understand what the reason is behind it. But certainly we've had no indication of the long-term sick cases that we've had over the last 18 months that would indicate that it's connected with long COVID. And obviously we've got the occupational health support, so quite regularly those that are on long-term sick will have a review over the phone or by Zoom with occupational health. And of course, if we hadn't picked up or the GP hadn't picked up that some of the symptoms causing the long-term absence might be more associated with long COVID than the reason the doctor's fit note, and that's really all we can go by. But we would kind of get some input from the occupational health professionals as well.
Excellent, thank you. And just the final question that I've got is around obviously the recruitment challenges as I think they're calling it, was the press saying, the turnover tsunami that was anticipated post-summer as people realised that they could, the return to normal might not be what they wanted. Obviously, we're seeing a bit of an increase there, and as expected. In terms of future planning, though, around kind of what that talent stream might look like and how we're bolstering that, given that we now have anticipated, the increase in turnover, is there anything that are changing working practices? Is that flowing through to the hiring practices and kind of how we're advertising the roles and the difference in what it now feels like to work for NHGC versus what it used to feel like? Perhaps, is there anything that's kind of changed in that regard? And are you seeing that that's having benefits or the opposite?
I think probably the key thing to say is that, the great flexibility that we have for home working, which obviously is similar to a number of employers, but we've obviously committed to supporting that on a long-term basis, which isn't the case with all employers. We kind of seeing things in the press now about, not all employers want staff to continue to work from home, and even if the staff or employees want to continue to work from home. I think in terms of promoting that opportunity, there's possibly still more that we could be doing, but certainly the flexibility of having remote working in place has allowed us to have sort of a wider geographical talent pool to draw upon. And I know we have employed, in fact, somebody in planning policy, I think, has been recruited in the last sort of 6-8 months who lives sort of a good sort of 2 hours commute from the office, but of course won't need to be in too often because she's in a policy position rather than a planning officer post. But certainly, that in ordinary circumstances, that might not have been something that would have seemed feasible from either us or from the applicant point of view. So it's good to be able to draw upon a wider pool, and I think that's the biggest benefit really for us.
And on that, Jo, sorry, everyone, are we therefore starting to monitor now the impact that that's having on our diversity? Because one would imagine now that we can draw from a wider geographical pool that we would have positive impacts on the kind of diversity profile of the workforce.
We do look at the diversity statistics quarterly, and it's performance measure that we can report through the Pentana system. We haven't. I think it's too early to say, if I'm honest. So certainly we we look at those regularly, but yeah, I think it's interesting to keep an eye on, and we can sort of feedback in future meetings if that we do see a significant change with these things. Sometimes they can be subtle changes, can't they? And it's difficult to pinpoint the reasoning behind it. But yeah, and I think that's an interesting point.
I think it's worth understanding the correlation because it will help to inform future strategy. Brilliant, thank you. Sorry about the interrogation. Okay, right. Are there any further questions before we move on to item 5? No, I've got no hands. All right, so let's go on to item 5. And Helen, you're here to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so as Jo did, I won't cover the whole discussion paper, but I'll just go over a brief summary. So NHDC has had home working in place since 2010, with many of our job roles being suitable for ad hoc or partial home working. So prior to the pandemic, about 65% of staff were able to work from home. There were some teams such as Careline, Customer Service Centre, that remained wholly office-based, and there were other staff working out in the district, civil enforcement officers, the grounds team, the waste team, and the museum staff, for example. Obviously, this changed in March 2020 when there were a number of staff that began to work from home for the first time. So there were some immediate practical challenges linked with this move to home working. The first immediate challenge was the IT connectivity to get those staff who weren't previously set up and running to work from home. So in March of 2020, the IT team set up about 130 Citrix connections, which is about 30% of staff, to allow staff to work from home either using their own equipment or NHDC provided equipment. And the next immediate challenge was the suitability of the home environment for people. A small minority of staff, about 15% based on the staff survey, didn't have a suitable home working environment. So arrangements were made to support these staff, either in the form of additional equipment, office chairs, screens, etc., or the opportunity to work in the office as soon as that was deemed safe to do so. There are obviously ongoing challenges of long-term home working, and less face-to-face contact with your team, so the potential to cause disconnection within teams. So to address this, we've been encouraging managers to continue to have regular team meetings. And we also encourage managers to share ideas on different ways of working. Some examples of those were virtual work-togethers. We introduced virtual onboarding, new starter get-togethers, apprentice catch-ups. There were weekly Zoom catch-ups, a weekly roundup emails to the team. And once more restrictions were lifted, there was walking one-to-ones and outside meetings that took place. And so we're sort of continuing to encourage that to happen. The telephone system also underwent a scheduled upgrade to support more home working. One of the biggest challenges of the long-term home working is the impact on mental health and well-being of staff and feelings of isolation. So in the short term, to address this, we initial welfare calls to staff to check how they were adapting to full-time home working, particularly those that have never done it before, were made by the HR team. This was followed up by emails to staff and further calls to those individuals or teams that were particularly struggling. As you can see from the report, we introduced a number of initiatives to encourage staff to get together in different ways. We now have some virtual staff briefings. We had a virtual kitchen, the mental health first aid drop-in sessions that Jo has mentioned. We had an IT drop-in session, it's just to kind of name a few. The focus for the HR team during the extended working from home period has been to make sure that staff know where they can access the existing support and provide additional resources and support to them. The main focus is positive promoting mental health and making sure that staff understand it's okay to talk. And that message will continue moving forward as well. You can see in the report also some of the other challenges of long-term home working, and we continue to support staff to address these challenges. There are also rewards for long-term home working. So many staff have really embraced the opportunity, have adapted very well, and there is a desire for staff to increase home working in the future. But obviously the challenge is balancing this with the service need. And you can see in the report also a number of other benefits that employees have highlighted to us that they feel is a benefit for them. For NHDC as an employer, we've been afforded a number of benefits of home working. We've had these for some time, obviously, which is lower levels of short-term absence. As we mentioned just previously, the ability to attract new employees from a wider geographic area, less days commuting to the office, and improved retention as home working is seen as a valuable benefit that's an established benefit within NHDC. As part of the future ways of working plan, we will be looking at getting the right balance between home and office-based working. As has already been mentioned by Joe and Ian, the plan has been shared with staff, and we will begin to encourage staff back to the office in some form on the 4th of October. The supports that we have in place for staff and the initiatives that we've introduced to encourage hybrid working will continue, though, to ensure that nobody feels excluded. So, Joe, if I've missed anything, please jump in, but otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I don't see Joe jumping, but I do see Terry waving. So let's go to Terry.
Yeah, a couple of points if I can, please. You mentioned some of the things we're doing for employees, great, around IT and such like. Do we do the same for members as well, especially new members who joined us perhaps in May? That's one question.
I can certainly comment from the staff point of view, but from a member point of view, I wouldn't be able to kind of give a good answer.
Let's remember the title of the meeting, Terry, and we'll maybe take that one to someone else that can help with the members' IT.
I think that the point being is that whilst we are not employees, yeah, if we are making things available like IT, for example, to work from home, because members work from home as well, we're being asked, I'll give you a classic example, why I'm sitting here now. That's working from home. Yeah? This meeting in the past has been held with you people in the office. So there's been things which we've done to help you officers, so you can do these sorts of things. Have we done the same thing to members because they have a responsibility and a role to play in this as well?
So let's take that outside of this and we'll pick it up with the IT department. Perhaps Ian Cooper, if I could just look to you to kind of take an action on getting on just seeing who the right person is to answer that question, but that's not one for the Joint Staff Consultative Committee. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I'll continue if I may, please. Yeah.
Well, you can, yes.
Why couldn't I, Kate?
Beg pardon?
Sorry, why couldn't I? You were saying, well, you can, as much to say, do you need to? Yes, I do. Sorry, okay. I'll ask the question anyway. Fire and Rescue Service. Have we been approached by the Fire and Rescue Service regarding on-call firefighters and recruitment from North Herts District Council employees?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Lots of head shaking.
The reason
I've not picked up anything at all on that.
Okay, the reason I ask that is because I know down at County Hall they're doing that. That Fire and Rescue Service are looking at officers there who are now, of course, working from home with whatever they have made available to them, so that they are more available for on-call firefighting arrangements than they were perhaps when they were based in the office, because it's easier for them to perhaps get to a fire station as an on-call firefighter. I'll take that up with County Hall and see if we've gone out to districts and boroughs and moved that forward as far as on-call firefighters are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Claire, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. The home working and the isolation, mental well-being of staff and that, and also I think I read in one of the reports about having Zoom fatigue. I think, I mean, as somebody who was always a long-term home worker and always on conference calls, never had the luxury of always actually seeing all my staff. The one thing that I often used to do was never have meetings booked as an hour slot. I always used to stop them at 1:45 or 10 to the hour for two reasons. One, if you did overrun, it gave me a few more minutes. And secondly, you got that little break from meeting to meeting. And I don't know if that's a practice, but I can see Helen nodding away. But it's something I would honestly always encourage staff. Never book meetings for an hour. Always leave, 5 or 10 minutes from one to the other, because it always gives that employer the time you've got to actually stand up, stretch, go and get that coffee and come back to your workstation.
Yeah, there is a lot of education of staff around things like this. So we do often put articles in our insights about good meeting etiquette, making meetings shorter, booking time in between meetings to catch up, stand up and move around. So yes, that's a great point. Thank you.
Love that point, Claire. I was moaning the other day. I missed the walk between meeting rooms and just the people that you bump into and just that time, that moment of just digesting what's just happened and getting ready for the next meeting. So yeah, I love that. I love that tip. Are there any other questions or comments for Helen? I did have one, and this might not be for you, Helen. It might be for Ian, and it's a little bit controversial. With people working from home a lot more, and obviously there's some commitment there, particularly towards the end of the report, around people that do need to be in the office, that they will be given the opportunity to do that. Do we have a kind of desk usage monitoring system? Are we looking at how much of the building we are filling and how much is empty? Is that something that's in the plan for recovery?
Yeah, if I say that, Chair, we are implementing a desk booking system. So that's in training at the moment and will be ready for the beginning of October. So that will then give us information on how many desks we're using and on what days and that kind of information. At the moment, we are planning on keeping the third floor out of use because the response to staff survey implied we didn't need it. We'll keep it under review, and that will potentially give us an opportunity to use that for a different purpose if we don't need it. But yeah, we'll also monitor what else is going on with the other desks that are staying in use. To start with, we'll just have half the desks available, just for the first 4 weeks or so, just to maintain a bit more social distancing, and then we'll move to all desks being available, assuming everything goes well thereafter.
And I'm presuming that there's no rush or urgency to look to decrease space available, but that what I'm hearing, I think, is that you're intelligently monitoring that, and if that is an option, then that's one that we'll look to take.
Yeah, if we can, we will obviously use that space for something else. I don't think at the moment it's a great time to be trying to get rid of, to offer the space out anyway to other people, because they're still working out what they want in the longer term. But if it all kind of comes together in terms of timing, yeah, we'll offer that space out and hopefully find a different use for it if we don't need it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Peter, I'll come to you in just a second. I've got one more question, unless it's on that point, is it? Yes, no?
No.
He's lost me. Okay. So just very quick point. I can't remember where I read it, and I should have pressed the highlight button and I didn't. But there was something in one of the reports around that not only is flexible working looking at where you are working, but also when you are working, which is assisting carers and people with other with other responsibilities to be able to flex their working day if that's possible for their role. Is that some? Did I read that right? And also, how is that being monitored and evaluated for kind of effectiveness and well-being purposes? And that might be for you, Helen, or perhaps Jay. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, although anybody else might want to chip in as well. Yeah, certainly we obviously during the lockdown period and when people had sort of caring responsibilities that were kind of needing to be balanced or so on with work demands, we've given a very sort of flexible approach to all of that. Obviously, since schools have gone back, I mean, there are other caring responsibilities, obviously, besides school-age children. But we just, encouraging managers to continue to give that kind of flexibility. Obviously, under our flexible working policy, we've got an opportunity for people to request flexible working practice at any time. So if it's a kind of a formal request, whether that's for sort of a temporary period or a permanent arrangement, then that can be done on a sort of a case by case. In terms of numbers, we haven't seen kind of a massive increase. I think people are, the ability to work from home has been a sort of a massive benefit for flexibility and work-life balance and so on. And as you say, we obviously as managers need to balance the service needs against the individual needs. But where managers are unsure or staff have got concerns that their arrangements might not suit the service needs, then certainly we can get involved and advise managers on what's happening in other service areas. So if applicable, we can kind of apply some fairness and consistency, of course, and give advice about what might be suitable and what might not be. But I think in terms of cases where we've been asked to be involved or advise, it's been relatively limited. And I think the general approach from the leadership team has really been to try and give the flexibility that's needed within service, balancing service needs.
That's brilliant that we're able to do that. That's really encouraging. Thank you, Jo. Keith, coming to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Just an observation, really. I know that in our work as counsellors, when we've used Zoom, we've managed to attract a much wider and newer groups of people to our panel meetings, to the arts and culture groups. When we did surgeries via Zoom, we got people who would never think of turning up on Hitchin Marketplace on a Saturday morning, but they log in on Zoom and give us. So I'm just wondering whether you find that you've been able, as a benefit of this, you've been able to get a wider participation from people working from home who perhaps maybe wouldn't have shown too much of an interest in an office environment, but have logged on to participate.
Yeah, we really have. I think Anthony will attest to this as well. The staff briefings are really well attended because people who would have been working from home but may not have come in for a staff briefing will log on. And we also noticed it with any training that we did as well, because people don't have the travel time either side of it. So if it's a short workshop, they will log on for a couple of hours, whereas they may not necessarily may change their day to go in the office for a few hours. So yeah, the benefits of this are really and are obvious, and moving forward, to have both the ability to be in the office and deliver it virtually will really help, I think, to make sure that all staff feel included.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Keith. Are there any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay. Let's move on then to item 6, and thank you, Helen, for your full coverage of that report. That's really appreciated. So future discussion topics. So we've got some timetables that are set out. Is there anything that you'd like committee to think about that's in addition to the list of suggestions, or is there anything that we want to put on? So we've got the next one set for the modernisation of, or how are we modernising the recruitment process, which has come up today. And obviously we've got there on page 31 the list of suggested topic items. So we could do well to I think it would be fair to the team if we could set the March topic now, and certainly have a think about that. Yeah, I suggest that we have a go at that. Any thoughts from anyone?
I mean, changes in the employment market may be a follow-on from modernising recruitment, and it may be that by March things might have settled into more of a routine, and we can understand better the impacts of end of furlough, apprenticeship schemes, what our vacancy level is, possibly.
Yeah, thank you.
Any
other thoughts?
You could consider something around how the return to the office has gone and what that means, because by March we should have bedded down into the new working pattern. So you could have something looking back on how that transition back to the office has gone and what that means in terms of our future working arrangements. That could be a possibility.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts to throw in, Claire?
Yeah. When's the next staff survey being done?
We don't think we have a date fixed. The old approach of doing one every 2 years, we moved away from during the pandemic. We did much more frequent and shorter surveys. So I would need to double check when we're next due to do a wider one. From the top of my head, I want to say we were due to do the 2-yearly one last year, but didn't because of the pandemic, and so did one that's a bit more pandemic focused. So we might do that wider staff survey this year. But I'll, so long way of saying I'm not entirely sure, but I can find out.
No, that's I was a bit sort of couldn't remember. I was just thinking that if there was a staff survey that was either going to be done, maybe this committee would look at the questions, or if it had been done, if we don't get an input on the questions, we maybe would look at the results of it or have an insight to it.
I think as part of the return to the office, we've already said we'll be surveying staff. So that would be the next one. So certainly we could present, if we went with the topic I suggested, we could certainly present the views of the staff that we've surveyed as part of that report to you. And we can potentially include some of the wider issues we normally talk about around sort of senior leadership team visibility, those sorts of points, because actually it's going to be quite interesting to know how that's perceived in a different working environment. So I think our next survey probably will be a wider one, so we can include that in the results.
I'd like to throw something else in the mix, but I think it might be one for June, and I'm aware that that's a whole new year. But it's just looking back over past topics, it seems to be a bit of a gap of inclusivity, diversity and equality that don't appear to have been kind of brought to the committee and addressed. And I think if we're looking at modernisation of recruitment, we're looking at this wider geographical area, that might be a good one to look at perhaps in June. I mean, I think we've had some really good suggestions. I do think I'm in support of what Anthony has suggested there in terms of the March update and looking at how the return to work has gone. Would everybody agree with that, or are there anybody that wanted specifically to expand on Keith's thoughts on the recruitment market, employment market?
I think the two sort of go hand in hand anyway, really, to a certain extent.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're there with that one then, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. So, are there any further questions or comments or on anything that we've talked about today? Anything that anyone wants to raise? No. All right. Well, it's been lovely spending this morning with you and Isla, who is beyond cute and not sleeping. So thanks for bringing her along. And yeah, I shall just close the meeting now. So thanks for attending.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.